6, we be in the mix with that rare candy paint job on the whip. I need food for the kids, money for the rent. Fuck a lockdown, baby, I can't do that shit. And I don't never vote, cause I'm fucking broke. And either way, I know the police ain't gon' leave me alone. On a plane by to visit Glen Rock, need crypto, told me I should bring the Glock with me. So I packed up my piece and I'm sliding. Cause we might get caught up in a riot. Middle finger Trump, middle finger Biden. Fuck a left, fuck a right, is you riding? Know you love to see it, dudes rocking. Ain't no politics, baby, we just talking. From the birds to the bricks, we be in the mix with that rare candy paint job on the whip. Who you with?
We're back. We're talking George Harrison. You might have, if you heard the TPN Beatles episode. If you haven't, please get signed up. If you're not a patron of Jack's podcast, the Perfume Nationalist, don't know what you're doing. I wouldn't admit it out loud, but go get signed up before everyone finds out. And check that out. We are on the latest episode. Very, very thorough discussion on the Beatles. But we didn't talk a lot of George. That was by design. We're going to be doing that today. George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. But first, I have to ask Jack. You know me as a 1 cent and Antaeus user, and I love it. However, my hair is getting a little too long for Antaeus. Like I don't think it matches my look right now. I bought some patchouli soap from this farmer's market lady that I can't get enough of, and I know we did when I was on for Patti Smith, we did like a patchouli scent. Mm-hmm. Is there any other like really like a masculine patchouli scent that I'm missing? Like that would.
Oh man, there are so many. I mean, I like basically collect patchoulis.
Right.
I'm looking at my shelf for Bourbon French from New Orleans is like a great cheap one. They make a spray eau de toilette. It's extremely strong. It will smell like any of those kind of like hippie soaps that you get. That's a wonderful one. That's about $40. If you want something that has patchouli and has a patchouli spirit to it, I would get Corone Yad Again, which is about $35. You don't have Yad Again, do you?
No, I don't. That's the only one. And I have the Versace Eau de Toilette in the little blue square.
You would probably like Yad Again. This is a weird one that I really like. Parfum de Nicolai Patchouli Intense.
Nice bottle.
Which has a kind of leathery 70s quality to it. I would go with Bourbon French, the spray for your first one. Givenchy Gentleman, the original, not the thing they sell under the name Gentleman at department stores today, but they still make it and they call it Gentleman Original, and you can get it online. Is basically just patchouli, a very beautiful musky patchouli from the 70s. That's one of the best.
And I was gonna ask, did you see that that viral thing going around with the hippie girl? That was the weird Zoomer like hippie girl, like that everyone was pretending. Oh, I would never. Like everyone was pretending that, but the
fairy girl.
Yeah, and it was very produced. Like she obviously was not like she was just adopting like a hippie aesthetic or whatever. And then like you'd see a mic drop in, like as if a hippie would ever have like a mic like submerging into there when they're talking. But she I saw the viral post was like, ugh, I could just smell the patchouli from here.
Smell the patchouli. Yeah, that's such a like normie, Gen X, like older millennial, like NBC show, like The Office type of basic bitch humor. And it's not even accurate. Like people, I mean, on the hundreds of thousands of hours of my podcast, I've talked about this at length, but the whole stereotype of like the world, like, you know, patchouli scented hippies running amok everywhere, going to fish concerts. This is not like an accurate stereotype. I know in certain localized places, like whatever, if you're New England lesbian town where people wear Teva sandals, I'm sure you encounter more people that wear patchouli because they always come from it. But no, it's not an accurate stereotype. And also basically most people don't know what patchouli is. First of all, they think it's just this general
like incense. I think they think it's incense.
They think it's incense. They think it's Nag Champa, or they just think it's like the smell of like dirty people, like BO. But in isolation, they always like it. I mean, it's in basically every perfume, and it smells like clean dirt. So how could you not like it?
Amazing. Yeah, I
their
was
reaction to that video is so it's crazy, man. Yeah, I don't know.
Anything with like girls triggers the hetero hive mind, and but that one I was just like, whatever. I mean, she's having fun. I don't. The thing that bothers me the most, not really bothers, but with like these like younger online girls who make videos like that for TikTok, they always have, even if they're doing like a hippie look that's supposed to be like the woods, they have the full contoured Instagram makeup and the lips drawn over the line, and it's like so out of place. I'm like, can't you do a little more like on theme hippie makeup? Like,
I just love the guys that'll be like, I would never. She seems stupid, and I'm like, that's is that where we're at? That's where we're at right now. Yeah,
would meet that girl in the woods and get wasted and have sex with her and remember it forever and be jacking off to it to this day.
I was like, what changed? What? Like, I was like, wait, that was the deterrent for now, I guess. Like, just because IQ, everyone cares about IQ. That's right, because you might
IQ, and she's a degenerate because she's like singing about doing drugs in a cute way or whatever. She should be being a trad wife on the internet.
Yeah, she should be buying raw milk for $27 a gallon. So today's fragrance of the day. I mean, I'm not expecting anyone to talk about this, but George Harrison's preferred fragrance apparently was Tabac.
Tabac, yeah.
Tabac by I'm gonna Maurin Wirtz, 1959 fragrance, clean, soapy barbershop quality that George Harrison found very soothing. So that's all I got on that. I don't know, Jack, if you know anything about that.
And he wore patchouli later, because I was researching what they all wore too, and what I got. Let's see, I found Paul wears Guerlain Vetiver, which is perfect. And there's like an actual, you can find a lot of these like what celebrities wear things with no evidence, but there's an actual interview of one of the daughters saying he wears that. And then George, I think the Tabac would have probably most likely been like a drugstore thing in the 60s. And then when they all got their minds expanded, everybody started wearing patchouli. So later years he would have smelled like patchouli.
Excellent. Yeah, so I had to look that up. We're going to get you right back to the episode, but I just wanted to let you guys know of a few other things we offer at Rare Candy Industries. We have a Substack with free and paid subscription options. Free subscribers get access to all written content. That includes Bob's Red Pill. That's the best thing going on the internet right now. Trust me. Paid subscribers get full access to our premium episode feed. And that's just every episode we don't necessarily want to share with the general public, if you know what I'm saying. Again, that's rarecandy.substack.com. We also have merch. That link's a little long for me to say right now, but go to the description, go to our merch store, and find a shirt that's right for you. We have Rare Candy shirts, Dr. Bronner soap label shirts, Rishi mushroom shirts, all types of stuff there. Check it out. There's got to be something for you. And lastly, check us out on social media. On Instagram, we're Rare Candy Pod, but on Twitter, we're at Rare Candy Pod 1. All right, enough of that. Let's get you back into the episode. But today we are talking about no huge deep dive, because George has a bunch of albums, but I mean, can't really do a deep dive right now. There's a lot of, well, you have a lot of deep dives, I'm sure you're doing. We have a lot of deep dives we're doing. We're doing a very shallow dive on George Harrison. I already know so much about him because I love him. I grew up on him. My mom, the first time she ever exposed anything George Harrison, I didn't even know it was because I hated it so much, was the Traveling Wilburys album, which I've never seen a band made of more people that I like that sucks in my life. And Traveling Wilburys were terrible. But when you look back at, I was watching some of their documentary footage, late 80s LA, they're all kind of old guys. Tom Petty's the young guy in the group, and they're all just kind of like having fun. And it's kind of, and most of them are dead now. So it's nice that they kind of had a nice, Bob Dylan's ironically the one that's alive, which is crazy. That dude's gonna live forever. But anyways, I love his album that we're gonna talk about, All Things Must Pass. I have a deep connection to it because I had kind of a tough go from like 2018 all the way to 2020 right before the world had a tough go, which was kind of interesting. And I was just having like really bad mental health issues, had a few really tough things happen in my life, like nothing so crazy, but just a accumulation of a lot of weird things happening that resulted in just a real anxious behavior by me, a little bit depressive. And then, all of a sudden in 2020, right before COVID, or almost right before the first week, my wife had a issue and she had to go to the hospital and like stay a couple nights. And it wasn't like, it's nothing crazy. Like it was nothing crazy for anybody who's wondering, and she's fine now. But all of a sudden, you ever have that album, like when you start your car, if you got the Bluetooth setup or whatever, and like a random song starts playing. So I was like leaving her at the hospital and, driving away, and it's raining, and the song "I Live for You" comes on, and I weep. I'm talking like weep, like SpongeBob SquarePants, like fire hoses of tears coming out, like not the manly well up kind of situation, weeping. But I instantly felt better after, and it's like that's literally what the album's about. And so it stayed with me forever. I became just I've always liked the album, but I became obsessed with it afterwards. And I listened to it today on a nice long walk on what's probably going to be the last couple of weeks of really, really nice weather here in California. And it was just magical, but also a little stressful, a little stressful, because you're kind of reminded of the time that it saved you a little bit. But the reason I like this album for you coming on, Jack, is because you like Nightmares.
I do love Nightmares.
Yeah,
It blows my
why?
mind when people, because you can have all these adventures and you wake up and they're not real. And the feeling of, like in mine, I usually get sentenced to death and they're about to kill me, or I'm in prison. So I like narrowly escape my dancer in the dark execution every time. And the sense of relief when you wake up and realize it's not real is just so good.
Yeah.
But I've always had really intense nightmares and really intense dreams. And I sleep like a rock, and perhaps unnecessarily also often take melatonin and Benadryl just because I like them. But everybody's like, those give you nightmares. You see the Slender Man or something, and I'm like, that happens every night. My life was ruined by The Exorcist in 4th grade, and my brain has not been the same since. But yeah, I love Nightmares. I mean, it's just so great to have this like dump of all your like worst darkest aspects and desires and fears and everything, and get to experience something so intensely and so vividly, and then wake up and have it not be real.
Oh, totally. And I've thought about that because I'm not a very vivid dreamer, and my nightmares are more frustrating than they are scary. But I had like the anxiety. I used to have like really, really bad panic attacks, like really like in public places too. It was like really embarrassing. I used to have to like go like isolate myself at like dinner or something, like, just dumb stuff like that. Like it's just like I felt like trapped in like almost a claustrophobic way, but it's clearly something other than that. And but I kind of miss that feeling of like, I still have bouts of it here and there, but I kind of like almost getting there, like having a bunch of coffee on like an empty stomach, you know what I mean? And then you're just like, oh, cool. Let me win this battle real fast, because you can. And it's kind of the similar thing. It's not, obviously dreams are different, but Sai, I want to hear about this album for you, because I never heard you talk about it too much. It's usually me gushing on about it, so I'd like to hear your.
Well, no, I was gonna say when it was weird when because we've always been homies, we've always talked, sometimes more than others, but always talked, and we always talk a little bit about the Beatles, but then we never really talked about this album. But then somehow, I think after we started Rare Canyon, we talked about it on that Beatles episode. So, sometime before that, we both just kind of realized we both bumped this album, and it was kind of like, oh, cool. It was just this, we'd never like, hey, listen to this. We had already listened to it separately. And it was just one of those common threads, those islands that we found ourselves on, and yeah, it took me a while. My brother got me into it. I even after being in the Beatles for a long time, he's like, oh, you haven't heard this one, dude? You got to check this out. And, George is like anyone who's like slightly cool or is like, oh yeah, that's the comment.
Yeah.
Oh, George is the cool Beatle, which is true. It's
signifier.
signifier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, I love it. Maybe we could dive deep into this later though. I am of the camp. I don't care if this makes me in the mainstream or not, but I do think Phil Spector took a shit on it production wise. I think it could be way better. Just sounds like sonically, it just sounds a little muddy and stuff.
Oh yeah,
I know. I'm getting this out of the way early. Like obviously the songwriting, the songwriting's crazy. And then again, I brought this up last night. Seeing the Let It Be sessions, the 6-hour Disney Plus bullshit or whatever. And just seeing him come song after song, just these classics coming up to usually Paul and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And Paul's like, nah, we're going to do Maxwell's Silver Hammer. And you're like, bro, what the fuck? Like, these are like, you passed up on some heaters. It's like draft picks, You're just like, so anyway,
those are both good points. Those are both very, very good points. I have similar take to it. There's I'm on the fence on the Spector thing, but Jack, what is your experience with this album, if any, or how'd you feel listening to it?
It's rooted to a particular very happy time in my life. I didn't listen to it attentively until 2015. Just because there was never a copy of it around, like since the record is so big and it's always in like terrible shape in that box, like and it was expensive, so less people have it. It just isn't like laying around as like cultural detritus in the same way that the regular Beatles albums are. I started working at a boutique hotel that was really fun for like the first year because I got to meet a lot of celebrities. And it had a very like intoxicating aesthetic, and I was like, we burned Nag Champ all the time, and working the front desk, there were a bunch of records and we could just play whatever. And I started playing All Things Must Pass like all the time. Every day I went in, I would play it start to finish all the time. And it would just amaze me that this had evaded me for so long. I knew that George was the one that cool people always said was their favorite, to be contrary, so I think I was subconsciously turned off by that.
Right. Totally.
But I was interested in it. I'm always interested in any kind of like maximalist project, anything, especially any album that is a double album, or in this case one of the rare triple albums. This is probably the most successful double triple album ever because so much of the good material was backlogged. I mean, it's amazing that this came out like 6 months after the Beatles officially broke up. So it's just the whole package is designed to be this massive statement of George's liberation. The rest of them released their one little album, but then here this giant expensive box that's 3 discs, and every song is just like towering, totemic, huge, totally unlike Beatles songs. It's very like forward thinking. It definitely looks forward to the 70s a lot in the production. I was like listening to a normie podcast about this today, and they used a word that people always use with this album, which I hate, which is the word spiritual, which is when a libtard or atheist sees something that's Christian but that they approve of, or like someone cool did it, so they don't want to give credit to the Christianity inspiring anything cool. So they just call it spirituality, which keeps them free. So regardless of the technicality that he's into like Hare Krishna or whatever, it all just washes over you in this very Christian way. All of the subjects matter, all the songs, they sound like they're in the gospel way. about both like God and sex.
Oh yeah.
I love how relentlessly like positive it is. It's rare to have an album this cohesive that's in like a positive kind of mood and not just rock stars thinking about like doing too much drugs or being sad or whatever. I love the wall of sound Phil Spector production. I think that causes it to be really smooth, a really smooth listen from start to finish. I know a lot of people don't include that last disc as like officially part of the album because it's like these bonus jam things, but I think it works perfectly in the flow.
It's fun. Yeah, it's fun.
It's just you just leave it on, and you know, it's always better than I remember it being. You know, when I
remember
to
Jeep, dude. Yeah,
I remember Jeep. And he wishes John Lennon a happy birthday. I know Yoko asked some of his closest friends to make a birthday song for him. I think she asked a couple other people during that time. It was John Lennon again. Feeling old. John Lennon's 30th birthday was coming up. He would only make it to 40, sadly. But you know but yeah, it's Johnny's birthday. All that. It is a very It's weird. It makes me feel very emotional. But if you take my personal experience with it out, it's an extremely positive album. And yeah, you're right. I mean, there's cover songs on there, and the gospel aspect that you bring in that you brought up, it's totally there because a huge factor. What George did is George had a vision, but George also listened to people, and he listened to Billy Preston a lot. And Billy Preston was a guy who really helped out the Beatles on their later stuff. Pretty much did a lot of the key work on a lot of their later projects like Abbey Road and Let It Be, and even performed at the Rooftop show with them. By the way, Billy Preston, I went on his Wikipedia page. I didn't know about his whole little thing that happened later in life. Very interesting. Where he got caught. Oh yeah, he got caught. Or I don't mean caught, whatever, like soliciting sex, where he was picking up like what seems to be like Home Depot, like Mexican guys, and like jerking them off. Didn't know that. Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's very strange. If you look at Billy Preston's Wikipedia page, like, I mean, it's like you want to talk about, you know, replacement theory or whatever, like the Great Replacement. You know, they're taking your jobs. You know, that could have been you in the car with Billy Preston. Yeah, like Tucker Carlson. Billy Preston is hiring illegal immigrants, and no, very you know what though, whatever, gospel piano player, you know, I'm sure it's happened in the past. Probably Billy Preston born in the wrong era, probably. But anyways, yeah, that's there. Billy, he when he was writing My Sweet Lord, that's a huge controversial song because of what you said. Nobody knows how to talk about it, but it's about God. It's just
about God.
It's
People
God.
Are such liars. They'll be fine with calling it about Hare Krishna or whatever.
I know.
Fucking orange robed 70s bullshit that's safely tucked into time, but they won't call it God. They won't call it Christian. That scares them. It's about God. The whole album is Christian. Okay, you don't have to like worry about the Hare Krishna, whatever. It's just it's I think the song that I fell in love with most first, where I was like, I can't believe this has been waiting here, undiscovered by me the whole time until this point, is What Is Life? Because it sounds like a girl group song about somebody's boyfriend.
Yeah.
But again, it sounds like Christian. I love that. There's so much of that, like Phil Spector, like Supremes sound. I mean, My Sweet Lord is like a mix of three of those type of songs, and there's like tedious you know, songwriter plagiarism scandals about it that I don't care about, but yeah, it's all those like Supremes type like songs about your boyfriend. Like there's so much of that in this album, but the boyfriend is God. It's like the South Park episode. Like,
well, yeah, exactly. And getting back to My Sweet Lord, like what people don't realize is that Harrison experimented with all types of quote unquote spirituality. It's all true. All that stuff is true. He always said there's a man in the sky. It's all about one guy. It's whatever I'm doing is still done through the lens of God. It's not Indian. I'm not this. He loved the sitar. Ravi Shankar helped him out with a lot of things. Ravi Shankar actually helped him make this album in a sense, and I relate to this big time, where this is kind of like My Psyche, this kind of like Kafka-esque like thing that when Kafka resonates with you, you can relate to this a little bit, I guess, is the Ravi Shankar, George would he had a bad temper. He would get really like worked up about things. And that's part of what this album is about in a few songs. But Ravi Shankar would just be like, hey man, just relax. You know what I mean? Just relax. Like everything's gonna be okay. And that's essentially kind of where All Things Must Pass, the title track, comes from, is Ravi Shankar telling him to just relax. Like it's never as bad as what like you are, the script you're writing in your head for like the terror you're about to go through. And so that, but yeah, it's like it's always been about God, and I love that song. He did get in trouble, quote unquote. He knew what he was doing. He took the basically combining the Hare Krishna mantra, which he learned from this one, like, man, I watched the documentary. It was like this white Ben Kingsley looking like Indian guy with like paint on his nose. And George bought like 300 copies of his album. And this guy was like, whoa, that's sick. Like, and he had just like one of those like Indian mantra albums. And he was like, yeah, all of a sudden, like the Beatles address on like Abbey Road got like 300 copies shipped, which that would be crazy if like that was your album. And, but there was the mantra was on there, and him and George and John were sailing in the Mediterranean together just because they're filthy rich and fucking around. And were singing that. They said till they're like they went hoarse, like singing that mantra, but they wanted to the Billy Preston showed him the gospel thing that eventually got sued from. George had to pay $1.5 million to put that song out. And it was kind of like everyone was advising him like, hey, just play the song at live shows. Don't put it on the album. But no, it sets the entire tone for the album. Like,
yeah, he put it out because it was the message of God. That's why he paid all the money to put it out. All those kind of like plagiarism things that you see these epic YouTube videos about.
Yeah,
those are all such fake news, because the wonderful artistic institution of hip hop, they can take entire songs and just talk over them. And people have to collectively pretend it's like that's the separate art. But then when George Harrison does it, it's just fake news. You have to just pretend that,
I agree,
acknowledge that that's not real at all. The whole framing of that type of thing whenever it happens.
Very interesting.
But side with that song, I meant to ask you, is that a 12-string that he's playing with? Like, why is that guitar so thick on that My Sweet Lord? Is it a 12-string? Is that as simple as that?
I was wondering. Yeah, I was actually. It's either that or it's double tracked.
Well, he had Peter Frampton coming. Peter Frampton is on this album playing just basically like they said, strengthening guitar, which Harrison always needed a lot of help, like as a guitar player. Yeah. He's very creative, but execution wise, he knew that he needed help, and he always sought out after it. But it was a young Peter Frampton who was in a band called Humble Pie at the time. They had a few hits at the time. So I'm wondering, like, just to your ear, is that what it sounds like? Because I don't know.
I leaned yes, yeah, and I think it is. I think there's a lot of it's hard because of the production, because everything's really echoey on all the production, which works with that, especially that song.
It's a choir church song, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I also really like this song. The Beatles in general were really good at subtle key changes, not the dumb like Tina Turner half step up, kind of climax thing, which has its place. It's like cliche now and everything, but especially Lennon did a lot of weird key change, especially in like the Magical Mystery Tour era and stuff. But this one, it has that weird kind of throws you for a loop where, because when you sing it in your head, you're often singing the second half of the song, and then you hear it start, and you're like, wait, you'll play it over again, and it'll be in the lower key. You'd be like, what's going on? And it kind of is that ladder up, like reaching towards God kind of a thing. I think it's
totally
metaphoric to it, but it's very well done and very subtle. Kind of almost slips by you if you're, it's easy to just go along with it and be like, oh, what happened there? But the funny thing with this album is and I don't mean this as an insult at all, but it starts kind of slow. It's like a slow burn, I feel.
Sure. Which I think, it's a Bob Dylan sex song. You get a Bob Dylan sex song for the first track, basically.
It starts with a slow song, just like Tusk starts with a slow song.
Yeah.
Good point. That's a good point. So what were we saying, Si? Keep going.
No, that was pretty much my last point. The Bob Dylan stuff. And go ahead. Yeah.
No, and Eric Clapton's all over this album playing. Like he's basically doing all the soloing, and I really enjoy his work. I love when
Derek and the Dominoes, right?
Yeah,
Like that,
and the Eric Clapton is a huge part of this album for like a million reasons. I mean, it's insane. I still can't get over, like, it's still so crazy. Like the psyche of George Harrison just being like, no, it's like my best friend. But he and for anybody who I talked about on the TPN episode, Eric Clapton's on this album. He's a Beatles super fan at this point. Definitely not big as a solo artist at all. He's part of a group called Cream. George Harrison was a part of Cream's last single, and then they became friends. Clapton plays on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, very legendary solo. By the way, side note, I love Clapton as a part of things. I'm not a huge fan of his like solo discography that much, but I love his when he's a part of something. I think he's really, really good. And but yeah, he's all over this album. And meanwhile, he's creeping up on Patty Boyd, George Harrison's wife, his new wife. She's a somewhat famous model. I think pretty famous model at that point. And Harrison kind of has one big blow up about it. Like they were pretty much honest about it. He's just like, yeah, I'm in love with your wife, dude. I don't know what to tell you. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, for a second. And then after a while, it was kind of like a Step Brothers, like, Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly thing. It's like, so what are you doing next week? Like, you want to, like you guys can come over. And like, they ask him at a press conference, and he's like, do you still like talk to Eric Clapton? He's like, yeah, we're like having dinner later, like,
yeah, they would go to like Thanksgiving together and shit.
He's like, and it wasn't like a cuck chair scenario like you'd see now, or like a polyamorous like TikTok like
polycule.
Polycule. Like, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. Like it was just like he said, he's like, well, Patty's with a cool guy at least. He's like, he wasn't with some dumbass, like, so I was just like, hey. And then he ended up being with a woman that was really good to him, put up with his, the documentary is very funny because she's like, yeah, there's other women. She goes, and if you want to know the secret to marrying a celebrity and having it last for a long time, don't get divorced. And that was her thing with his newer wife. He had a son with her and stuff. And that maybe that's all meant to happen. But yeah, he's all over this album. And Wah Wah is another track he's on. I love it. I think that's where the really muddy Phil Spector mixing comes in, because it's really, really,
I love it.
I love that song. I absolutely love it. I'm like half and half on Phil Spector, but this album is my favorite album of all time, so I can't hate it that much. It's like it's really good. But Wah Wah is great. It's his like pissed off at the Beatles, like you never gave me a chance song, mainly Paul McCartney, because if you watch the Get Back documentary, as Cy alluded to, he's playing like he's playing the title track, All Things Must Pass. I think he wrote that song in like the Rubber Soul era. Like he'd been sitting on that song forever, and Paul's doing his like silly guy voice while he's singing it, kind of like, okay, we'll play George's song, but then like I'm gonna, he was definitely like, he was tired of like shilling to get a song, on an album, because he knew he had a lot of good ones. Now, that being said, I don't think a lot of these songs are Beatles songs. I think they were right to keep them off the Beatles albums, because they need that like kind of folky, I don't even know how to describe it. Like they belong on this album. It's all meant to be. Like, I think it was all, and his frustration was warranted too. Everything happened correctly, like even if they didn't enjoy it at the time. And Wah Wah is phenomenal. I think it's a phenomenal song.
It's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't remember.
I was just yeah, I think just to clarify on the Phil Spector thing, I think it works really well for some songs, and then other songs I just wanted a little bit more tuned down. I'm not talking like Let It Be all the way stripped down kind of vibe, like
right.
psyop they did that to us in the 2000s. But just a little bit more. And I don't know, I feel like not to sound cringe, but this album works because I feel George's connection is more genuine than Paul's and Lennon's too. That like Lennon had that whole, he was like spiritual or whatever, but it seemed more like he was like doing a performance or like a bit, and totally. I do think it was, I'm not saying it was fake or whatever, but George is like the introverted guy, the guy that was really about this shit. He's like, no, I'm gonna chant for 10 hours because I'm dedicated to this thing, and yeah, it's interesting, and I feel, I don't know what it was like back then, but I feel the Indian thing, the Hare Krishna thing. I don't know. I was probably more open back then, and like going to church and you could actually sing, you know, in the Western world. You know, today it's everything sterile and weird, and it's just all like, you know, like pop punk church band or whatever. But I've been like when in my hippie days, I've been to Hare Krishna like little events and stuff, and I just tagging along with people, you know, and I didn't even know what it was, you know, but they were like, "Oh yeah, this is George Harrison thing," and I'd go and dude, people are getting fucking lit, dude. They're just going crazy, drumming and stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, I get why people like this because you can." It's a place where you can sing and dance, and that those places don't exist in the Western or the atheist world anymore. I think Rupert Sheldrake. I'm getting a little off track here, but he said that's a big reason why people return to religion because they just want a place to sing and dance, and that just doesn't exist in our world unless you're like at 2 a.m. in a club, like coked out of your gourd kind of vibe, which has its place, but that's usually I don't know. I think George was really about that life, and this was kind of a way for him to cement that into his reality, you know, and just make it his. And yeah, they're not Beatles songs. You know, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I didn't know. There's only What Is Life. What Is Life might be the only song I could ever hear on like an old Beatles record too. Not even like timeline wise, it wouldn't have even fit. Like it just all of these songs are so George. I mean, it's such a George album, and his like his frustration, but he's still friends with everybody. Like it was weird. They said George used to communicate through the music. Like he said he was only friends with like people who were good at things. That's how he referred to it. Like, so, you know, like his friends were like Tom Petty or, you know, Jeff Lynne or even studio musicians. So he could like communicate. Like I kind of relate to it because it's like, Sai, half the time I talk to you speaking, we're recording.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not because that, but it's like, for the most part, we're sending texts and stuff. But like, when I talk to you, it's on this. We don't live in the same area and stuff. And it's kind of like he wrote to, what is it? Behind That Locked Door is telling Bob Dylan to like, basically like keep expanding, keep like, Bob Dylan caught a lot of flack for like going electric. That was like a big thing. It seems stupid now, but it was boomers love to like talk about that all the time. They love
the folk purists in the
people that like folk now are the most retarded people of all time. So like they're like the people that are doing that now, the purists, the stomp clap hey ho people, like those people are responsible for a lot of bad things. But anyways. Bob Dylan, he wrote that song for Bob Dylan. It's like he was communicating to the Wah-Wah songs for the Beatles. Apple Scruffs is about his fans. They basically called them all those women that would just take really good pictures of them outside the studio, and you would get the only raw photographs of Beatles people. And he said, yeah, you guys were annoying as hell, but like I miss you, you know, like it was
that's my favorite track on the album.
Love Apple Scruffs. My favorite. So beautiful. So I just
Bob Dylan on harmonica.
And they're all over. There's a 20-minute YouTube video of everybody that helped out with this album, and it's just like huge person after like Robin Trower, all these like huge like drummer from Yes, like all these like big names, and they're all over it. And it just seemed like a really fun hang, you know, even though it was a big high pressure album, because you can tell he clearly wanted to be like the first Beatle. Even though I think Ringo had the first #1 album, George had the first #1 single after the Beatles, which is kind of crazy to think about it. But that's side one of the album, you know. Isn't It a Pity is not my favorite, but it fits. I don't know about you guys.
Isn't It a Pity? I mean, I like it. It's given this importance because there's the two different versions of it. I mean, nice, vague, heal the world sentiment. It's not what makes this album great. But I think the whole feeling of this album is just like so specifically when someone is in a creative relationship where they're so used to repressing things in order not to make other people mad. Like you just become, and then you're suddenly liberated to do whatever you want, and it's like this vast expanse of, you know, open plains and everything that he wants to do. And you can see how that experience is just the worst when you're just like stuck with someone forever, can't get away, and everything becomes this constellation of like not pissing them off by saying, by doing or saying something
totally
that will.
That's a great point. Like wah wah wah, there's that line, and I've always known the line. I know every word to this album, but like I've always known the line. But it's like, you ever like listen to whatever your a millionth time of an album, and like one line just kind of grabs your attention that never did in the past, and it's kind of one of the later lines. And I love how Harrison's voice is just, he doesn't really have a super crazy powerful voice, but he can bring it out here and there, and he kind of just blends in with the rest of the songs. I really like that. But he says in Wawa, I know how sweet life can be if I keep myself free. And it's like, where's the lie? And it's not creatively speaking, like we do whatever we want on this show. We talk even whether people want to hear it or they don't want to hear it. So that part is free. But in like my day-to-day life, it took a long time for me to just say, fuck it. I don't care about these people that I'm walking on eggshells with already. That the first thing I say is like, oops, we're not friends anymore, but I have to put up with their manic, depressive, stupid mood all the time. Their dumb shit. I have to be the one to put up with that. When you realize George was the king of just like, okay, I don't need you in my life anymore. And that is the true spirituality part of the world, is caring a little bit less about like material things of that nature, in my opinion, is when you've truly, and that's if you progress in Christianity, anything like that, you're not supposed to care about little things like that. Like just of these people that are like grading you with a red Sharpie every time you talk, just to be your friend. And that's how he's like, now I'm in charge. For whatever happens. If this album's a flop or whatever, I'm free.
Is there anything worse too than that feeling of being paranoid about disappointing someone that you don't respect anymore anyway? Where you're just like, wait, why do I feel weird about this? I don't even give a fuck about you anymore.
So many people stuck in that trap the last 7-8 years.
And the rules have gotten more absurd. So it's like, that's always been a problem for people. Like it's kind of just been a human nature thing. People that want to impress somebody, but the approval doesn't even feel good when you get it. So that's always been a thing. But just the fact now, it's like, I voted for Donald Trump or something. Like you say that, like, okay, you should burn in.
And what do they have to show for it at the end of the day?
Nothing.
That's what's funny to me, is people who are super beholden to their social relationships during the last 7 years of politics, and they have all of these fake versions of themselves that they present to libtards who can't know who they really are. And what do you have to show for this years of reducing yourself and watching what you say at the end of the day? Oh, you can like meet a libtard that you knew in college or high school for a drink and like censor yourself around them. That's what you have to show for it. Great. I'm glad that relationship was so important to you, because I lost all those people really early on, then found through the internet friends that I actually like. So
that's crazy. And that's beautiful. I feel like Glenn and I kind of, we had different meandering journeys, but kind of came to that same conclusion where we both kind of just like shed a lot of that old stuff just in time for all this 2020 stuff. And then we started our show serendipitously right around that time. But I'm also, I know we alluded to this last night's, but George is dead. John is dead for a while now. Those are the guys I want to know what they would think about what's going on today, for better or worse, right? And of course, no disrespect to Paul or Ringo, but like, I don't care. I don't give a fuck what Paul or Ringo think about like current events. I want to hear George's take on like mRNA or you know what I mean?
Yeah, just like any of that stuff. Yeah, just literally anything. Like, and I mean, we know he'd feel about taxes and inflation, but we know that. But the at least he put that on
this Biden inflation is just fucking.
It's always like a question with these old guys of whether they're like crusty old British guy who doesn't like censorship energy overpowers their boomer lib wanting to be a champion every fake conflict or whatever. So like who Roger Waters is the bass one in Pink Floyd, right?
That's true. No, that's true.
So like there's that impulse there. But then also when they see those flags of little countries where there's some dumb conflict going on, it's all over.
I know. Especially, and then it's like the temptation for a British man to go full Elton John is always there. It's always
that Ukraine flag.
The button you press.
Yeah, I mean, like Paul McCartney at his last concert, like I'm not gonna dump on Paul like that, but like I see some of his tour like stuff, and it's like it looks like he almost hired people on like Fiverr to like to have like Ukraine flags, like being like, it's just like that because he deeply cares about that, about like not the conflict. I don't think he gives a shit about the conflict. I don't think he even thinks about that kind of stuff. But I think he cares that like, oh, I should say something. And like that crosses the mind. But George and John are so interesting. I wanted to bring this up. I'm glad you said this, Si, because we talked about Lennon on TPN. We talked about Lennon a lot, and we talked about how he just like doesn't feel real. It was like he if I saw him, I mean, Jack, you've met famous people. I've met a few famous people. I didn't really get starstruck by anybody, but with Lennon, I would probably like almost bow out of like shaking his hand because it would be so scary to me because it just, I don't feel like it would be like a Wayne's World, like we're not worthy kind of thing. And but like George, it feels so relatable. He's like a guy like I'd be like, what's up, dude? If I saw him, like, because I just am like, he's almost literally me. He's almost like me and you combined. So I feel like where it's like, like I will talk about it a little later, but like some of his, I watched his the wonderful Scorsese documentary on him. It's on Max that I really, really enjoyed. And some of his stuff, I was like, man, it sounds like shit that you've said, man. Like it's just it's crazy. But yeah, I think George would have been based, and he would have had a friend in Eric Clapton because Eric Clapton spoke out against lockdowns and all types of stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. So he would have had his friend. Still,
George is, George is a very, very nuanced guy, obviously introspective, and he mentions in the days of the Beatles, he never gave a fuck. He was never impressed by any celebrity. Never got down with any of that. So like meeting famous people is just always like cool.
Even the Jimmy Savile, like that weirdo guy. There's like those pictures. Someone in your Discord put this. Jack, like, he's like Jimmy Savile's just being weird, and all the Beatles guys are like happy, and George is like looking off, kind of just like, what the fuck is this? Like he's like, I could go call Terry Gilliam if I wanted some weird gremlin looking like figure to hang out with.
Yeah, that's that Jimmy Savile guy is just one of those British cultural things that just does not compute to an American at all.
He's just the guy that we all know. It's
the
like
guy with the banana hair.
Yeah, I can't.
Just crazy eyes that was on TV, you know.
I can't see like Don Henley. I can't see like Don Henley like getting excited about Jimmy Savile or something like an American band. Like it just doesn't. It's a British thing. It's British bait, like a rat trap for them. But like the
from the 5 to the 6, we be in the mix with that red candy paint job on the whip. I need food for the kids, money for the rent. Fuck a lockdown, baby, can't do
shit. So that's so.
Oh, the other thing. Sorry, I just remember this now. I just have to tell a George story. I'm sure I told you this, Glenn, but Crosby, Stills, Nash. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I think before Young. Because I think Nash and the Beatles were tight in the early days. Graham Nash, right? And so anyway, they were kind of blowing up, and they got a chance to demo their whole album before it was an album in front of George Harrison for Apple Music, trying to get a record deal to break through in the industry. Is like, we got this whole thing. We're doing the harmonies. We'll come sing it for you. And he goes, and they go and sing it in front of George. The whole album, they play it like 45 minutes of songs, all the harmonies and everything. And George is just like, nah, I'm good. I'm fucking good on this shit. And then he's like, this is like his friend too. He's like, nah, I don't want this shit on my record label.
Graham Nash, huge libtard. Huge libtard. He's part of this. He was part of the performative Spotify removal of catalog because they, with Neil Young and Joni Mitch. I know that I will never let those people ever forget.
As soon as you remember, like in the early days, like when Prince was still alive, and they would all, and Taylor Swift too, they would all try to like find a way to like beat the encroaching Spotify thing, with that being the dominant way people listen to music, and like none of Prince's music was on there. Right. As soon as that was like finally solved and like all the music was on there, it became like a COVID vaccine protest thing because of Joe Rogan. and fucking Joni Morgellon's ass, Joni Mitchell, who's like in a wheelchair and like barely sentient. Just like I just like imagining the practical reality of what happens when Joni Mitchell or like Carly Simon, whoever, at like age 80, and they can't leave. What's that island in New England where all the rich women live?
Nantucket or whatever? Or is it,
no, Carly Simon lives there and she can't leave there because
the
all
Hamptons or one of those.
All of her,
one of those. Yeah,
one of those islands where
Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard.
Martha's Vineyard. That's where all the rich ladies with fibromyalgia live, and they can't. Just imagine.
We got that in on both episodes.
Like, what's the call that like Joni Mitchell makes to the representative? That's like, I want you to pull all this from Spotify because of Joe Rogan. How does she even know what Spotify is?
She's like the old lady getting out of the bathtub in The Shining, like calling oh my god, calling her Martha's Vineyard sheriff, county sheriff.
The shameful things that those living ones do. Do you remember when like James Taylor was like going like this with Joe Biden? I think like swinging back and forth with Joe Biden. It's just like it is such a relief for the ones that died.
And it's also not that it matters either way, but it's funny that the whole Rogan sector was largely correct on all that shit, dude. That's what makes it even funnier.
I know. You know? It's like you're literally wrong, but whatever. They don't have to pay the price.
They don't have to pay the price. It doesn't. Everything they do that gets proven wrong is memory hold instantly.
I know. Luckily, we have these programs to always remind people. But the So moving through the album, you mentioned What Is Life, love it, total boardwalk, hand dipped cone, greaser jacket, walking down, seeing the taffy being made with your girlfriend and everything. Totally agree with that. They do this horrible thing with Beatles songs now and George Harrison solo songs where they recreate music videos for them with like famous people dancing in them. Hate it so much. There was this Zoomer, like Weird Al Yankovic looking Zoomer girl dancing, just from going door to door dancing. And I was like, I don't want this for What Is Life. And then the My Sweet Lord video is really on the nose because of course the lyrics is I really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long. So you're searching for God. It's Fred Armisen in a tunnel with a flashlight looking for God.
Why not?
I was like, why not? Yeah. I swear to God, can somebody just give me money, please?
Something
like not even to do that. Yeah.
Love to do early COVID was any of these surviving people. They would do like new YouTube like videos like that, music videos with their famous songs where it was like supporting the essential workers. And so it would, be whatever their famous song is with like the essential workers of New York wearing that. So lame. And like, gray haired like Nally Merchant or whoever like phoning in on Zoom.
The Decemberists. All the
Decemberists.
Exactly. But I love every side of this album, of course, but If Not For You, I think is awesome. It's better than the Bob Dylan song. Sorry, Alec, but it's better. But it's cool because Bob Dylan's involved and he's there and it's fine. But I just love Harrison's voice. I think he's like a great singer. Like, actually, I don't know. I love unique voices, kind of like Bowie and people like that, where it's like kind of bad sometimes, but good. That's what always resonates with me. And I love his slide guitar because he was, I think it was Badfinger or one of those groups that they would like, Harrison would tour with in between the Beatles in his solo career and kind of just go around. He was like friends with everybody and he picked up like a slide guitar, just started playing, and he was already having people telling him he was like amazing at it, which nobody ever really did. Paul used to kind of shit on his guitar playing skills. He never, he's really not like the most talented guitar player, although I think he has one of the best ears for guitar riffs and fills ever. But his slide guitar all throughout this album is really where like the emotion comes out in the songs, even like coupled with his voice. And you really hear it on My Sweet Lord, If Not For You. I mean, throughout the whole album, Let It Down, and Behind That Locked Door, which is just a great, it's like a country song. I mean, it's so good.
Yeah, I was gonna say the slide elements throughout this album they're like half country and like half Hawaiian lap steel guitar vibes. You know, it's
Yeah,
kind of like
very
that weird, like,
Hawaiian. Yeah.
ooh, you know, yeah. I like that shit.
And
Yeah.
the country thing works really well because If Not For You was an early hit for
Mhm.
Olivia Newton-John too.
Mm.
Because you know how like in the 60s and 70s, if you're like an attractive woman with a decent voice, you could have a career just endlessly doing
Cover songs. Yeah.
covers of
Uh-huh.
Bob Dylan and Beatles songs.
Yeah.
So true.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of these like George Harrison songs, a lot of
Joan
different like
Baez. Yeah, Joan
girls
Baez did that.
sang
Yeah, for
them.
sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Olivia Newton-John had a really popular version of that, which I like, and she was like Australian country at the beginning. So
I know.
Mhm.
I love. I totally. Actually, I have to listen
British
to
and
that. That sounds great.
Australian artists, they love country. They love American country and hillbilly shit. They fucking love it,
mhm.
dude. It's like
Mhm.
even like Jimi Hendrix's band, the first one, they were all about that hillbilly, that weird
Mhm.
like
The
triplet
skiffle
kind of
stuff. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
funny, dude. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like a
great.
mighty wind, like ass sounding stuff. Yeah, it's but yeah, run of the mill. Like I don't understand how they got some of those like guitar tones in that. Like there's so many different guitar tones on this album. Love run of the mill. Ringo's all over this album too. Like he's playing. I think he plays drums on Wah Wah and Isn't It a Pity? And I believe What Is Life. I think he's a few other things. Lennon. George kind of got his moment with Lennon because he was a little bit pissed off at him and Yoko. Especially there's that classic scene of Yoko sitting on his guitar amp and like trying to be cute on his guitar amp while he's playing, and he's just like, "This ain't that we're not doing this anymore." So after a while, he's a little bit still friends with them, but he kind of wants to like alpha John a little bit. So he invites John to the studio where this is being recorded at. And it was one of the many rooms of Abbey Road or whatever, and invites John in, and John said he was like floored. He was like floored and like hugging him and like crying, and he was just like so happy. So you know, of course, you're happy about your friendship kind of being mended again, but you know, he's kind of like, yeah, I gotcha, man. You know, so it's that level of like masculine competition, but it's not like the end of the world that you're kind of feeling, using your like slight animosity towards each other to fuel great work, because George played slide guitar on Imagine album. So it's like they were all doing that stuff. So
And if
but
you
yeah, I
guys
love
seen, I know you have, Glenn, but the the How Do You Sleep at Night
yeah, that
video
Mhm.
series of, oh, you should check it out, Jack. The John Lennon's Paul McCartney diss track, and he invites George to play slide guitar, lays down some awesome tracks, just talking shit about Paul, you know. So and he invited George to be a part of that, you know, which
yeah,
I thought was like
it's a
cool.
good
That's
song.
like their own
Yeah.
little club, you
Mhm.
know. It was
It's a good
around that
song.
same time
Nice.
as
Yeah,
this.
they're good. Yeah, they're good. And you know, and then I think what happens, beware of darkness is, I think, a masterpiece of a song, like on its own. Like I think it's great. And Where's the Lie, beware of darkness, because it is everywhere. And he
So
brings
true.
in like the weird like Indian Satan Maya. I guess that's what Maya means. I didn't know that, but I was like looking it up. I was like, who's Maya? I thought Maya was like a girl. But it's
Yeah, yo, watch out for fucking
yeah,
Maya.
I mean, hey,
Watch
you
out
might
for
want to.
Kali Ma.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
watch out. And it's like some Venus Willendorf statue or something. I don't know. Something like that.
Just some fucking female Indian thing, Indiana
Yeah.
Jones ass thing to watch out for.
He met her at the
Yeah.
Shankar compound. Yeah. it wasn't great.
Yeah. Are you
Yeah.
hooking Maya, dude?
Yeah.
Oh.
Beware. Yeah, that one over there is bad news. No, I love
Yeah.
that song. That's another Clapton's all over that. Some beautiful guitar soloing, but just some of those, like just some of those songs, it's like I can't pinpoint any individual lyric of that song, but it is a warning. Like, and that shit's everywhere, especially now. It's just like I see some stuff and it's like, I'm not Satanic Panic guy. I'm just a like evil, like that's bad when I
Vibes.
see something. Yeah, just
Vibes.
vibes, just like ew,
Yeah.
gross. Get it away from
I
me.
can
Like,
spot it. I can.
you
It's
can spot it very
easy.
well. Yeah.
It announces itself, and yeah, like there's it's a tough call between deciding whether something is like Satanic Panic, like unjustly. Well, first of all, okay, Satanic Panic itself, in the kind of like current way people use it, the libtard way, which presumes that everything was innocent and nothing satanic occurred or nothing evil. That's like wrong on its own. But
it's like a Wikipedia
sometimes
edit. It's like, no, actually nothing bad ever happened during that. It's like that's how I see that. It's like a weird
sometimes
revision.
like the satanic provocations, especially now, are so lame that inflaming them with attention, it really feeds them. Like dutifully every year when whatever non-binary fat, like what that guy Sam whatever
Smith,
Grammys performance where there's always devils and there's always an S&M harness, and it's like so just lame.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's by like the kind of like Ben Shapiro types, it's always like shown as being the most terrifying. It's like in the 90s where like during the peak of panic about Marilyn Manson, there would be other stuff on the internet that just like said that he straight up like sacrificed babies and like sucked dick on stage, and like you would read it and think like, how is this happening legally? It might like but the reality was much more mundane. But beware of darkness. Good warning.
No, you're so on point that all the there's always a panic now, and it's just so lame. It's not even cool. It doesn't deserve the attention. It's kind of reminds me, what's that? Starsky and Hutch with Ben. What's his
Stiller?
Ben? Ben Stiller. You know that part when he's ready to do the dance off, and he's like, "Dude, you shouldn't do this." He's like, "Why? You don't think I could take this guy?" Like, no, it's just incredibly fucking lame.
It's
It's
well,
just
no,
it's
it's
so
right.
lame.
The
one that really triggers me, who never gets any criticism whatsoever, while they give it all to Sam Smith or whoever, is Arca. Arca triggers my like pitchfork wielding, like
that's
I
the
tranny.
That's
okay. It's a whole.
I don't know.
We were talking yesterday about how everything is the post Bjork homogenic black satanic goo coming out of a girl's nose. With like shitty avant-garde music that's like an afterthought, but a bunch of like art pictures of them doing something satanic being presented as a fallen angel or like God or something. And Arca is like receives universal critical praise, but the actual content is so depressing and overtly like transhumanist satanic. It's all like worshiping like your transgender like mucus surgery gore, but everybody's fine with it. It never comes up. And the music itself is so chilling and disgusting, and you can see how this just warps the mind of malcontent teenagers. And that triggers me.
You're right. And it's like, to me, we've talked about this a lot on this show, and I think you're the same way, where it's like, if I see somebody with like devil horns and they're like, I'm Satan, yelling it really loud on stage with like blood and fire, I'm always like, all right, who's the real Satan? I need to find the real Satan, because the real Satan, like I said, is the Rod Serling Twilight Zone devil that's like offering you a slice of pie in the corner. That's kind of cool at first.
The already acclaimed ideological kind of like impresses you with the sort of gauze of intellectualism of this, like, you can control, you're a god on earth, you can put your feet in these transgender bottom surgery stirrups and become a famous witch artist. And what you're left with is you just kill yourself at like 32 or what, look at the moon, look at the fall to an early death looking at the moon.
Best case scenario, you have Morgellons on Martha's Vineyard at 85.
Best case scenario. Being a Wi-Fi radiated.
Remove your Spotify catalog, Johnny.
They're just living in Futurama jars out there, straight like president's heads, dude. I swear to God.
I know why. That's so
Martha's
funny,
Vineyard is just like a kind of lab where they're all in Futurama.
Dr. Moreau, so true, so true. Apple Scrubs, love it. We already talked about it. Let It Roll. Ballad of. They always have to have some dumb British title, it's a contractually obligated thing. Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp. oh, he owned the house before me, and it's always that they have to do it every single time. Waiting on You All, I love that because you could tell George just wanted to write like the most lyrics in a song ever. And it's great if you actually like slow down. You open up your heart. It's a very positive song. It's a lot of like it's a very chaotic sounding song. And Si, since you're the guitar player here, what do you think about? Because I know we're gonna have some people that listen to this that point this out, and I want to get it out of the way. Capos. George Harrison plays with capos. Are you pro or anti? If anyone doesn't know, it's the little clamp it's the little clamp that you put on so you can play those high chords without, because some people say you can play those without that if you're skilled. It's kind of like a technical guitar bullshit thing.
Anti-capo is peak Reddit. Think of it's up there with the most Reddit thing you've ever heard. It's so bullshit, dude. It's so
I can see it.
What it stems from is like really talented jazz guitarists could be like, hey, you could just bar that chord right there, just bar it, and that you can play anything on the neck. It's because most chords are just four notes max in Western pop music, especially like Beatles songs, and it's true. But then people take that into some kind of twisted weird thing, like, oh, it's just like the same as like metal shredder guys, like the faster you play, the cooler you are thing.
Dragon Force Reddit bullshit.
And it's just no. I mean, capo, every real stringed musician instrument has a capo in their arsenal to shift their catalog up and down the neck.
And George loved it. And I love those high chords that he plays. Yeah, I know. Capo. That's the thing, man. You're like, that's how you knew he had a heater album coming. I mean, he has Something, right, which is up there among the greatest love songs ever. And Frank Sinatra would agree because he Harrison got mad because Sinatra covered the Beatles' Something song, and when he debuted it live, he said, "I want to give a shout out to my good friends and musical geniuses, Paul McCartney and John Lennon," and like it's not their song, and so he's like, "Fuck, dude!" Like, and Elvis actually does a really good cover of Something. It's actually really good, and but then he has "Here Comes the Sun," which is one of the most beautiful songs. I mean, come on, like that's just, and he wrote that walking around with a ukulele in his garden with Eric Clapton, and Eric Clapton was like, you want to do what? And he's like, yeah, let's walk around the garden in this Friar Park house that he had, and he starts playing the song, and it's like, I don't know, he lived that like, I wake up with the sun, I go to bed with the with the moon, and like he lived that style of life that like it didn't give him the most longevity, and a couple things about well, actually I'll save it till we're done here, but the after that, the title track, All Things Must Pass, it's beautiful. I mean, how can you, if you're ever going through a tough time, just put it on, because George had it figured out. I think he did. He died of a pretty painful disease, but I think he had life figured out. So I would say put that on. And I'll let you guys chime in on anything else here. My last great like song that really just like sticks out to me, we all like the jam side of the Apple Jam side. That's great too. But Hear Me Lord, I think is just beautiful. Oh gosh, it gives me chills.
Yeah.
I found my like favorite sentence about this album that I always think about. It's from a contemporary review, the Contemporary Review in Rolling Stone. Says, both an intensely personal statement and a grandiose gesture, a triumph over artistic modesty, an extravaganza of piety and sacrifice and joy, whose sheer magnitude and ambition may dub it the War and Peace of rock and roll.
Wow.
He says it's of classic Spectorian proportions, Wagnerian, Brucknerian, the music of mountaintops and vast horizons. I always think about that, mountaintops and vast horizons.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Rolling Stone then, and then Rolling Stone now. Conservatives are eating horse piss and dying in the hospital. Yeah. Like back then, they actually wrote words that were good and actually gave objective reviews to objectively good music. And
we're so fucked.
But you're right, like because I remember you talking about War and Peace, like the movie. I haven't seen it or read the book, but you were talking about one of the iterations of it just being this like huge, grand spectacle, and that is what this album is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another song I wanted to mention is "Let It Down,"
Oh,
which
beautiful.
the band Spiritualized. Like
No, I don't.
that song seems to have like be like the key to their entire like output. All of the albums had titles like "Let It All Down." They all had this kind of like to use the S word, spiritual, vaguely like kind of
Yeah, yeah,
Christian, like, but also like medical 90s imagery.
yeah,
But that song has a good feeling of druggy release to it.
yeah.
It's also a great it works great as a demo version, just acoustic guitar.
Yes.
Mhm.
One thing about I didn't mention yesterday about like Lennon's. It's crazy to think that Lennon wrote, say, "Strawberry Fields" on an acoustic guitar
I
until you
know.
hear it, and then it holds up, and you're like, "Whoa, this is great!" Without all the effects and everything, it still holds up on an acoustic guitar. Where
Yeah.
all the studio stuff, it just makes it better. It's not a crutch,
Well, yeah,
And
and George too. George used to always be that when Paul and John would write a song like "And I Love Her," which is a classic song in my household, and it's there's that classic doom 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 doom. That's what everyone remembers from that song. Is that part of it? And I guess Paul came with the lyrics, which are great. It's a great song, great chords and everything. And while he was singing it, George just went doom 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 doom, and that's the song. Even Paul like admitted it in the George documentary. He's like that. He's like, that's the song. He goes, the song probably might not make an album if George doesn't add that key component to it, which that's what he was to the Beatles, was that key component. Ringo was the same way, the key component. I mean, the stars of the group were Paul and John. That's not up for debate, but George was the key component. And this, he knew he needed help with this album because it was this like ensemble cast. It's kind of like a I don't know, even like reminds me of those like Robert Altman films where it's like it's just a big crowd, a scene taking place in like a big crowd of people, like where like you're like, who am I focused? Oh, and then it's great, you see what you're focused on. It just reminds me of that so much. Any last thoughts on the tracks at all? Anything stick out to you guys?
Well, I wanted to mention the like physical presentation of it.
Yes, good call.
The color scheme is so unlike anything I've ever seen because it has the black and white. Well, first of all, it comes in this giant box that was famously fragile and like presented problems at record stores because
Yeah.
they would always get crushed and you very rarely see them in like good condition. And it was also extremely expensive and still is extremely expensive if you want to buy a physical copy, like just a brand new physical copy. Part of the reason I didn't hear this until later, but it has a black and white cover image, and then the inner sleeves are, one is like gold, like this like Uranus gold color.
Mm-hmm.
One is gray and one is light purple. And then there's like a really goth looking poster of like George in front of like a stained glass door.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that poster.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that poster so much.
Just very the presentation is part of the magic of this big expansive project.
And that's what happens when you just left a group like the Beatles. Like your first album, you either have to go completely minimalist or you have to outdo the maximalism. Like you can't do, and I'm glad he chose the latter, of course. I love how he just looks like the Travelocity gnome on the front of it, like on the cover, and he's just like kind of like just kind of just say they show in the documentary them like laying out all the like pieces on the lawn, and you're just like, man, for some reason like that shouldn't be the cover, but it is, and it's amazing. Like what that I can't imagine brainstorming that being the cover, but it's perfect. It's like I don't know, like you'd think it would be a painting or something, like some crazy painting that like Klaus Vorman would make or some kind of thing, but it's just him and his beautiful property. like sitting in a
he
chair.
had the hair that looked the best when it grew out. Like he had the biggest, most lustrous, lush, serious looking hair, where every time you see a picture of it, you're like, he's not kidding with this long hair.
And then remember when he got like Weird Al perms like in the 80s, like when he had he got like really weird perms in the 80s, and I'm like, dude, you had perfect hair, man. Like for me, like I'm trying to take a little off my shoulders, but I'm like, damn, I see George, I'm like, nah, man, fuck, I'm gonna let it go because it's so nice to see his like that. Like it's just, I love like his goes like right down to like his pecs, man. It's like just perfect. And oh man,
I
he
know. And do
has
you know how long it takes to grow your hair out as a man from short to that length? It's like he must have not cut it since like 1966. It's like,
and yeah, and the amount of like hiding you have to do on the in between phase, like
yeah,
of your hair
the
being,
lesbian in between phases,
yes,
which lasts the first, year and a half.
yeah. Oh man, it's yes, I do know. It's not great. A lot of hats involved. A lot of
Yeah.
hats involved. And but yeah, that's no, it's he had the coolest style. I love all his outfits. Even towards the end in the Beatles when they do the rooftop performance and he has like the teal, like toothpaste teal pants. And
Oh
his
yeah,
like little
those pants are
mustache.
amazing.
They all look amazing on the rooftop performance. They all look their best,
Mhm.
I think. And he was and then he in the even in like the Hare Krishna stuff, he looked cool. Like he always looked cool. Monty, for a long time he was bankrolling. Monty Python couldn't get Life of Brian made. That was getting, that was back when Hollywood didn't want to run an anti-Christian movie, I guess. But it's not, even though it's
Gen
not.
Xers still live in that world.
Yeah, but even then, like you watch the movie, it's really not. It's just like, what if people thought Jesus was the wrong guy, or what if people
Yeah.
thought the wrong guy was Jesus? That's just the real Jesus is in the movie, and it's funny because nobody's listening to him. Like he's like saying shit from the Bible in the corner and looks just like traditional Jesus in the painting. But they think this Graham Chapman guy named Brian is Jesus, and he's like, I don't want to be. This is crazy. It's just a funny movie, and George is in there. He's one of the women that wear beards as a disguise. And
he put his money into a bunch of weird movie projects, including the notorious Madonna Sean Penn failure of Shanghai Surprise,
crazy.
which was like entirely bankrolled by him and was supposed to be this big like Indiana Jones like star vehicle for them because Madonna was really charming and desperately seeking Susan, and then Shanghai Surprise was this
Amazing.
like total disaster.
Time Bandits he made a good amount of money on. That was a big hit. A lot of the Gilliam stuff he did was cool. I like Terry Gilliam. So people can kind of take or leave him, I guess. But
I like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which people hate now.
It's great.
I like that movie a lot.
It's great. I love Brazil. I love a lot of his. I mean, really, a lot of his movies.
I like that child abuse one too, which people hated at the time. Tideland. I only saw it when it came out, but I remember liking it. And
no, he's great.
Regarded as like one of the worst movies ever made.
12 Monkeys is great too.
I haven't seen that one.
That's a good one. Yeah, we covered it once. It was good. I really enjoyed it. It's Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, like kind of like very strange Bruce Willis role, late 90s. And but yeah, and then George, one thing a lot of people don't know about him is he got stabbed almost to death in his house. It's and the story in the Scorsese, his wife tells the story. She had to like bash the guy over the head repeatedly with like objects in the house. It was this crazy guy who thought George Harrison was a sorcerer because of his lyrics, which is like that again, that's how you know you made it, is when the weird guy, and it was this guy in like, I don't know where they were living, somewhere in England, and he was just like walking around the streets. It was somebody like people had recognized this like burnout junkie kid in the streets, and he was like muttering to himself, and then finally he like broke into the house and like ran up to the stairs and just started stabbing him, and he almost died. And this is after his first bout of cancer that he had gotten over, so that's pretty tough. But he was always fearful of, he never feared dying, but he said what ate him up about John Lennon was the way that he died. He said for some reason I knew Johnny was always going to die. Of course everybody dies. He said, but it was the way that he died that he said he put a lot, I guess, whatever Hare Krishna, whatever thing, they put a lot of stock into how you die. Or like, whatever, I don't know what it is, but apparently that weighed a lot on him, and he was thinking the same thing. Like when he was getting stabbed, he was like, fuck, this is how I go, like this sucks, like, like, this is terrible. And yeah, it's like, and maybe it's a guy who hated the Phil Spector mix on the album, you never know. Maybe that was what happened. But yeah, it just, and he laughed about it. Roy Orbison passed away too when he was when they were in the Traveling Wilburys together, and Harrison called Tom Petty. And this is where George reminds me of Psy, because Psy has like almost this uncomfortable like welcoming of death sometimes, where he just like will make the most inappropriate joke about somebody that just died, like not even a celebrity, but like a person. but because like you just don't care, and it's like but it does ultimately, after a while, it's like disarming a little bit, which is nice, but at the time it'll be like, fuck dude, like that's fucking scary. And but he did the same thing. Roy Orbison passed away, of course. He was the oldest guy in Traveling Wilburys, and Harrison calls Tom Petty, and then he's like, yeah, I just heard Roy died, and he's like, and Harrison goes, man, aren't you relieved that it wasn't you, man? To like Tom Petty, and like Tom Petty's like, I mean, I guess, like shit, like, because Tom Petty was like the youngest guy in the group. He's like Tom Petty tells really funny stories about Harrison. He said Harrison just gave him 10 ukuleles once. He just gave it to him, and he just goes, here, I want you to have these. He goes, just scatter them anywhere we hang out together, because you just never know. And just he was just that type of guy, man. Like he was that type of guy. I think again, he feels like more of a John Lennon is the I could never be him and no one could ever be him guy. And then George Harrison is he's literally me. So that's my relationship with those two guys. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, he's like the chill, dry, funny one, which could never be. I don't know. I don't identify with that. I think overall I'm fairly chill, but I don't. People call me like hysterical all the time, so I've internalized that. But yeah, he's clearly like he was always like the cool one. I don't know, just the cool one, because he's not the dramatic one.
I love the ukuleles. I love that. That's his male bonding hack.
It's funny that had a different connotation before, like Tweed girls. In the late 2000s, like Zooey Deschanel girls were all into ukuleles.
For sure.
Man, what was she? She was made in a lab, I'm convinced. Like, because the
worst looking celebrity I ever saw in person looked like a hag.
Really?
Looked like a hag. All that, when you see pictures of her looking like Katy Perry, she doesn't look like that at all. That's all smoke and mirrors.
Wow.
When did you?
And I just like a wrinkled crone.
Well, he used to work at is that your job?
It was at the hotel where all things must pass all the time.
I'm gonna tell my girlfriend
like a wrinkled hunched crone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's yeah. So any final thoughts on I'm still laughing at that, but any final thoughts on George, on nightmares, on anxieties, on death, on anything guys?
I do have a final thought, and my final thought is I was asked by someone who didn't like the Beatles what album they should listen to.
Good call.
And I think that All Things Must Pass is the good one for to get people who've like never thought about the Beatles much, because it's you don't like hear it everywhere. It's kind of instantly impressive. You can't get it out of your head, and it's not, you don't have to see like Apple commercials and stuff with all the songs in it.
Right. Yeah. That's a good
call. I think it's a good Beatles pill album.
Yeah, you know what, and I think because I've had like my phases with this album, and it always gets me to go back to the Beatles catalog again. Like you're right, it's kind of like it's just like it's almost like a weird prequel almost to the Beatles, even though it's not. Like it's it's a no skip album for me. You can just put it on. I mean, take a walk around your neighborhood, go do anything, clean the house, whatever, and put it on. It's phenomenal. Because my mom didn't introduce this to me when as the first Harrison. She had the 80s Harrison hits, which are great too. I got my mind set on like the Jeff Lynne, I love that song. Yeah. The Jeff Lynne, when Jeff Lynne was writing a lot of his songs, like who is a genius too. But the and then like Blow Away, that's a great one too. And the 80s, he was all just like, his album covers were just him smiling in like a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses. That was just his album covers, and they're just great. He was just positive as hell. And the
80s and 90s were just such a comfy, cozy time for all of these people, because I love seeing how all of the 60s rock stars drastically transform themselves into some sort of like happy, colorful commercial thing in the 80s, which people would shit on at the time. but it was so fun. Like, you know, Jefferson Starship being like the most extreme one that people got mad about because they were like the most like communist counterculture ones of all. And then they put out, you know, We Built This City and all of that, which is great, which people love now. But at the time, it was like they betrayed the ideals. But that when everybody got a perm and a mullet and was wearing just like magenta suits with shoulder pads.
Or like
fucking Mick Jagger dancing in the streets, like
or one of my favorite 80s videos of a classic band is the Tell Me Lies Fleetwood Mac video.
Oh yeah,
where they're on the farm, but like they're women dress like them now though in that video.
They have the
like
Amish sister wife thing,
with the flat brim hat and that, like, that is a very much like a brunch mimosa outfit now. Which is kind of, and my mom had the spiral perm that Stevie Nicks had back then, which was pretty funny to see. Like, you're like, maybe that's where it came, you know, maybe that's where it came from. I don't know. I just a big Fleetwood Mac fan, so yeah, perhaps that's the case. But yeah, I know that video is hilarious because Lindsey Buckingham has like insane makeup on. Like this insane like eye makeup. It is so he is so scary.
Yeah, the plucked eyebrows is the most confusing thing about Lindsey Buckingham. The mascara, it's like he was so gacked out. It's just like, are you just in the mirror plucking your eyebrows?
He's so scary.
He's
so he scares the hell out. He's from Palo Alto. I didn't even know that. He's from like not that far from me. Like he's from. I didn't realize he was a Bay Area. It's funny because I have family who had a house where Fleetwood Mac like kind of congregated at in the Bay Area because they do have Bay Area ties and stuff, and people said that they thought they were doing like sacrifices over there or something. It was weird. They were like, there was weird things happening in that house. I'm like, yeah, when they were back when they were like that was back when they were like a blues band, like
they were right.
Yeah. When they were like a broke like blues band, you know, like when they were really weird, like back in the day, they said they were like, man, they're like, we heard. And it's like and they were kind of like, those guys are just like druggies that like rock. They thought they didn't know that they were like playing the music, and then they're like, what the fuck, that's them, like, you know, rumors and stuff comes out. You're just like, it's insane, man. It's insane when that happens. So yeah, it's a good point.
I think it's really funny that Lindsey Buckingham is so like badly behaved that they like fired him recently. like they fired him like a year ago. Like, what did he do after like 5 decades of them fighting? Like, what was the final straw for him to be fired from the like fucking geriatric touring version of
he was probably some milestone he was about to get to for insurance purposes or something. They're like, it's probably like 51 years you get the thing of you know, he's not gonna get the plaque.
Replacing this like 30-year-old.
I know. Dude, I know. It's so, but you're right, that's so true about the 80s. Like I love to see, you know, and it's kind of reminds me of how like old like Betty Davis type actresses in the 70s would be like insane old horror women, like horror movies, like Betty Davis and like just like insane shrill, like it's all they could get. Who am I thinking of? Or even like Angie Dickinson's and like Dressed to Kill getting murdered by a auto gynophile and stuff, and is like something that like my grandpa would jerk off to on a Navy like baseball card size thing. Like
it was fun then because the image transformations and style changes from decade to decade were so extreme, from the 60s 50s to 60s to 70s to 80s, but now it's like all the same celebrities have been around for decades and decades, but style stopped changing at like the mid 2000s basically. So everybody still just has like the Mary-Kate and Ashley boho wavy hair, and you know, it's never gonna change.
So before we close out, what's coming up on TPN? I mean, you're always reading something, you're always watching something. What's coming up?
Well, the book club is doing Pamela by Samuel Richardson.
Nice.
So doing something very old, the one of the first narrative novels. I'm doing the first 2 volumes of Proust's Remembrance of Things Past.
Nice.
I don't like do anything by like consideration of like seasons anymore, but just I'm just doing it by year. So when the year is over, this season 5 will have been the biggest of all of them. stretching back to last like October, I guess. Just continuing all the various like series that I've started on Mary Tyler Moore, Knots Landing, and I don't know, there's always more to do, but
Always
now
more to do.
I have a bunch of like reading shit to do.
Well, on our front, guys, so we're doing another Gain of Fiction. Michael Crichton's back. It's going to be his Michael Crichton's sixth appearance on Gain of Fiction. I wish that was a real thing, that he was really coming on. Unfortunately, the libtards took him out because he wrote. Cy and I are almost finished with his climate change red pill book, which is.
Yep.
Oh my God, it's almost depressing how right he was. It's like, oh, I mean, Jack, you read Disclosure. It's like when somebody nails it that hard in real time, you're just like, dude.
And you just see all the lies perpetrated every time you Google it. You know, it's just like that added the debunking. You know, this was debunked.
You know,
it's 100% right about everything when you read it, but there's that to warn you away from reading it. They flood all the reviews.
We already figured it out for you. Don't worry about it. Yeah,
good information. Just going into this, you should know that it's misinformation.
Go ahead and pick it up. We're not banning the book.
It's been proven to be misinformation.
Yeah, if you want to read I guess it's fiction, right? Because I'm like, why are you trying to debunk fiction? He wrote it as a fictional novel.
That's
so
the
don't
beauty of it.
It's like Ayn Rand is fiction that has to be debunked too.
Yeah, I know.
She was on welfare. So, like, how does that affect that she wrote books about how libtards and communists are evil?
Yeah. I would recommend you read Crichton's State of Fear at some point, just because I haven't read Rand, but I've listened to you talk about Rand for a long time, so I tend to think it's his Randian like theory fiction novel, I think. So, and he wrote it right before he passed away.
I hate climate change more than like almost any other libtard thing. You'll take Black Lives Matter over climate change.
Dude, I'm telling you, like, if you're at any point, I will revisit it with you. It's amazing. It's like it's if you ever, I know we have some stuff planned eventually, but like if you ever do, because it's like, oh my God, it's like just nobody listened to him. Nobody listened to him at the time. It was all the people just thought it was
right. It was 2006.
Dude, because people didn't even think the South Park super serial Al Gore thing. They thought that was like fake. Like they were like that Al Gore was actually like, it wasn't even about Al Gore's climate. They were like, oh, that's silly. They're just making fun of Al Gore. They're like, no, they're saying it's fake. Like and guys, super serial. Like and that's like the man bear pig thing. Like it's just like, man, that's what this novel is. So we got that coming up on Friday with J. David Osborne of Agitator, and our other friend Banjo Jack will be coming on. So on that note, guys, everybody have a safe week. And if you haven't listened to the TPN Beatles episode, it's all one thing, guys. So we didn't record it all on the same night because that would have been foolish, but you can just go back to back. You'll get you through your whole work shift. So all right, guys, have a safe week.